Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Scarborough here with Consolidated Planning Group. We are also here today with April Martin from the Texoma Workforce Solutions. And today we're going to be talking about educational options beyond high school for your loved one with a disability that learns differently. I always start with our housekeeping items. We are in webinar mode today, which means that we can't see you or hear you, but we know you're here and we are glad that you are here with us today. We invite people to put their questions in the chat box as we're going through the presentation today. April will be monitoring that chat box and we will get through as many questions as we have time as we go through this presentation. If you're planning your time, our webinars go for an hour, so we will be done by that time. So thank you again for being here today. April, I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit about the services and who you work for, what you do, and the services that can help our families.
Well, thank you so much, Allison. I get the privilege of working with vocational rehabilitation and promoting it in the state of Texas through Workforce Solutions. For those of you that don't know what vocational rehabilitation is, it is a service designed to help people obtain, maintain, or even upskill the work that they're in if they have a disability. We have both student and adult programs. Students are age 14 to 22, and adult programs are anything else. I always advise people, if you have a student that will be a senior next year and you would like them to enroll in vocational rehabilitation services to get help before they exit high school, please do that before the second half of their senior year, because some areas, if you enroll them during the second half of their senior year, they will go to an adult caseload. And the student caseload involves a little bit more hand holding, a little gentler procedure. And with transitioning a student to post-secondary options, it's always best to start sooner than later anyway.
One thing, April, that I think I know as a parent, I was shocked that services start as early as 14, because in general, people don't work until age 16. But the point of services starting at age 14 is some of that pre-employment training services and some of the closing the gaps on the impediments to employment, so that way they may be employable at 16 or somewhere close to that time. And I just would like to mention, because we do have people that attend these webinars from all across the United States. VR is a program that is in all states, so it's not just in Texas. We're domiciled in Texas, but it is a program that is available in all states, right, April?
Yes, it is. And every state handles it a little bit differently, but yes, it's in all 50 states. So if you don't know what your state offers, I always just suggest Google vocational rehabilitation and put in your state and see what comes up. It's always a good starting place. Uh, Several services are provided that people don't think about. I always say that we are all temporarily abled. All of us at some point are going to have a disability, whether or not we like it. Maybe a skiing trip didn't go so well. So you have come back with a broken leg or different things. Those are all things that can affect your work. Diabetes, those are some of the things that can affect your work, and student schoolwork as well. All of our services are time limited, so everything is meant to get people going to work. And so if somebody has had vocational rehabilitation, perhaps as a student, and something comes up later in life, can they reapply? Yes, absolutely. So you can re-enroll in vocational rehabilitation. And the nice thing for student services, I will add, since they go from 14 to 22, once the high school is done, you still have a partner in the process to help you with your child. And your child can always sign to have you be a part of the programs once they've reached age of majority. It's always good to have an advocate with you when you're applying for vocational rehabilitation. I encourage that a lot. We can go ahead and look at the, oh, go ahead.
And
I'm so
one thing
sorry.
I found valuable, I had one of my kids in the program, is that in the initial, like in the beginning, and every case is different, and what they do for each case is different because it's specifically tailored to your child. But they did some specific assessments like neuropsych testing, learning disability testing. And then they also, for us, I mean, again, it's different for everyone. They did a vocational evaluation, which is spanned over several days. And that was designed to give information on what are the true impediments to employment, what kind of service and training does this individual need to close the gaps on those impediments. So I felt like that those assessments were valuable in figuring out what can my loved one do, what would be a good setting for them. So that is part of the initial process with VR. Is that right?
Yes, it is. The pre-ETS or pre-ETS are called, which is Employment Training Services, are really good for students. So we'll ask a student what they would like to do, and then we'll look at where could they do that at? Is it possible? And then we're going to start looking at those gaps that you've talked about, and they build a plan to fill in those gaps with services that we pay for. And that plan is called the IPE, the Individual Plan for Employment. It's not IEP, which in these intersecting worlds, some people get mixed up, which it's really easy. And then the students have a voice. They're trained to be able to self-advocate, which is good because it's really hard for parents to let go. And then also soft skill training. So I was at a business not long ago where a student worker was having a bad day and not communicating appropriately. So they needed a little soft skill training. And I'm sure that we've all seen some situation or another. So it's good to have those things in place before a student's ever placed in a workplace setting if possible. And so we work on all of that prior to. So as far as the school and the families, we partner and coordinate together, and it's a great thing. So I think we can move to the next slide.
And you just said something about the schools and the family. So I know in Texas, and I don't, again, all states do things a little bit differently, but there are counselors, specific VR counselors assigned to the schools throughout Texas. So you may already be getting services because they were coordinated through the school. But you can ask to find out who your VR counselor is for your specific school. Is that how you recommend kind of going through the door to get services?
If you have a counselor that's at your school, absolutely, I would recommend that. By far, it's going to be the quickest route to receiving services. And you should ask your school counselor or your TED, which is your Texas Employment Designee. Every school is assigned one, they must have one. You can always ask your TED at your school who your vocational rehabilitation counselor is. They should know if a counselor is assigned to your school or not. So another way that you can get services, if you just have no clue where to go or where to start, you can always call the statewide contact number, the 512. You can do an online referral. I always tell people make sure you keep your case number and be prepared to call a couple of weeks after if you do that online referral. I personally would recommend doing it in person. You can always apply in person at a Workforce Solutions office. Most all vocational rehabilitation in the state of Texas is currently co-located within a Workforce Solutions office. And I do have a locator here in these slides where you can check to see if the Workforce Solutions houses the vocational rehabilitation for your area. Workforce Solutions also offers employment specialists. So sometimes you can dual qualify for programs. You could qualify for WIOA and for vocational rehabilitation. And some people are like, well, why would I want one if one's going to help with tuition assistance or, won't one just take care of it? And sometimes where one program leaves off, another one will kick in. So I always encourage people to walk in the Workforce Solutions office, say you want to see the vocational rehabilitation counselor, because there should be a counselor of the day on duty usually. You can make an appointment with them if you don't want to just walk in, but you can do a walk-in. You can talk with the employment specialist, get help with all kinds of things that are mentioned here on the slide, even childcare assistance for sometimes people who need that. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. These are some examples of services that are housed in our Workforce Solutions, and there are several services that are similar, if not the same, at your Workforce Solutions. So I always encourage people to look on the website. There's a lot there that people just don't know about.
Sometimes in Texas, people are confused about workforce solutions versus the workforce commission. And I know you guys work closely together, but there's some different lines. One organization does more of the pre-employment training services and summer earn and learn, also known as the SEAL
Mhm.
program. And then the other one does more of the testing I was talking about, and one provides job coaches. So can you kind of delineate between the two of those? Because I think there's confusion with that.
Yeah. So what I like to tell people is when you walk in a workforce solutions office, it's like walking into a hospital. Sometimes you'll have independent doctor's offices within a hospital, and that would be vocational rehabilitation. They're like the independent doctor's office that has their own office located there, and they're providing services. And if they need to, they can refer you out to a different part of the hospital for a test. And that's what vocational rehabilitation will do. They work with anybody with disabilities to obtain a job. But if they see that there's another service located within Workforce Solutions, they'll ask the client, do you mind if we go talk with so and so? Or can I give you their information and have you contact them? I think they have some resources to help you. And then some of the other sources, for instance, if we had a student that was getting ready to age out of vocational rehabilitation and they weren't quite ready for full-time work, they might be ready for some supported employment through another program at Workforce Solutions. And so those are some things that we can do to coordinate those programs. But yes, Workforce Solutions offers a variety of different jobs programs that you can qualify. And then for the target occupation list here is actually one of them. Every area has one. And the target occupations are incentivized by local employers. They are in the highest need. So you may qualify to receive training assistance through those programs as well. So I always tell people if you're wanting to train for something that is on our target occupation list, come into the office before you go take out a huge loan that you're going to have to pay back. You may very well be able to graduate with lots of assistance and have very little to no loans, especially if you dual qualify for programs. I hope I've explained it well enough, but I always say just ask those people in the front of the Workforce Solutions for every program that you can qualify. Just give them as much information as possible so they can help you.
And I think that that's a big deal because we're going to be talking about educational options post high school today, and funding those educational options is definitely a thing. So if it's part of the IPE that she talked about, the employment plan for your loved one, higher education may be covered through these programs. So that is a really, really big deal.
Yes. This is the locator that I was talking about. So if you don't know where your local Workforce Solutions office is and you'd like to see if your vocational rehabilitation is located there, you can use these two locators to do that. And you can always reach out to me. I help people all over the state as well connect if they get confused by the different locators or have questions. But definitely Workforce Solutions and vocational rehabilitation are great resources. And I would say just be a really good advocate and keep asking for help. Say, what do I qualify? This is my situation, because you never know.
That is good advice. So thank you for sharing that. Tell us about the Padlet.
So on the Padlet, I do several presentations like I'm doing with you, or I do something called disability etiquette training for local employers, because as a navigator, that paid work experience portion of the pre-ETS that we were talking about, I will work with employers to provide work sites for students, and I work with vocational rehabilitation, our community outreach and awareness specialists to go out and do presentations to help prepare employers for people with disabilities, either as customers or as employees. And then I put up anything else on there that's of interest to people. So our flyers are there for vocational rehabilitation, that kind of thing, or you can just reach me that way as well.
Awesome. Well, April, thank you for being here with us today. It's always our pleasure to partner with you and kind of talk about these things. And I think it's timely if we're talking about, what's next after high school, post-education options. I think it is timely because sometimes it's a combination of both. Sometimes we delay higher education and we might build skills and maybe work a little ahead of time. So, and sometimes it's a fine balance between the two. So I think it's an awesome program. And so someone asked if this is going to be appropriate for people that are out of state. We serve people all throughout the United States, not just in Texas. So April is with Texas Workforce Solutions, but there are VR programs in every state in the United States, and we can help you kind of nail that down a little bit further. But as we talk about the higher education options and funding options for your loved one with a disability, we are going to be talking about generalized things that will be applicable to you on this journey and may be helpful to you. So for those of you that are joining us for the very first time, Consolidated Planning Group is a holistic special needs financial planning firm. We're nationally certified as Social Security advisors, members of the Special Needs Planning Academy, chartered special needs consultants. Our whole firm is nuanced in planning for special needs. I am a parent to multiple kids with disabilities who have aged into adulthood. And so I eat, sleep, and breathe this both personally and professionally. People come to us because they want to plan for themselves as well as their loved one with a disability. They want to know about how much money do we need to fund a special needs trust. What are housing options in the future when I can no longer provide the caregiving services that I once did? How and when should I apply for public benefits? What do I need to know? What do I do? What do I not do? When it comes to planning for a loved one with a disability, things are complicated. It's confusing. When you start throwing in Medicaid, Medicare, SSI, SSDI, some of those other public benefit programs, careful planning goes into place because we want to preserve the eligibility for those benefits for now and for the future. So we help people put protection plans in place, lifetime care plans, transition planning. And transition planning could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It may be transitioning from high school to adulthood. It may be transitioning from living in the family home to a residential living, place. It could be transitioning from college to the workforce. So transition is a broad word. Sometimes we use the word transition when you're transitioning from pediatric medical to adult medical. So it's a broad word and they kind of lump it all together. We help people set up ABLE accounts and we do a lot of advocacy by way of webinars. Our webinars live on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel and you can subscribe to that for free. There's over 500 webinars on planning for special needs. If you can think of the topic, it's probably out there. And we always recommend that people work with a professional that is nuanced in special needs. There's 260,000 financial advisors in the US, and less than 150 total have any background in special needs. And when it comes to our planning, our situation is specialized. So you do want to work with a specialist, and that comes to your financial professionals as well as your legal professionals when it comes to setting up special needs trust and guardianship and your legal documents. It's going to be really important that you work with an attorney that is nuanced in special needs as well. So we think about like who's going to care for your child when you're gone. We think about what's going to happen after high school. Some of our kids are going to stay in school until age 18. Sometimes it's 21, sometimes it's 22. Some that are here today are already out of school and we're looking for what's next. Consider touring transition programs. A lot of the public schools have transition programs tied to their school. There are also private pay transition programs, and sometimes those programs have waiting lists. So you want to look at those early. I know that when my kids were freshmen, I thought I had all this time. I felt like I had the time was on my side, and it's like you blink and they're 18 already. I don't know where the time goes. but it does go quick. And so when it comes to planning, we always like to remind people that it is important to make careful considerations as who the future caregiver is going to be. And it is generally not our recommendation for siblings that are a similar age. I know that there's one-off situations where we have siblings that have a 15 or 20-year age difference, and that might be a little bit different. But we want to have careful planning in place so that way your wishes are in place, as opposed to a crisis happened and what was set up was not at all what you intended. So planning early and revisiting that plan is going to be really important as you embark on this journey. So the first things first that I like to say, and I like to remind people because we live in this world of social media and comparisons and comparing our kids to other kids, and people always post the best things on Facebook or other social media, and sometimes we might feel a little bit behind. We might feel like our kids are behind. And so I always like to remind people they are where they are. They are not behind. And let's not compare them. It's my goal as a parent to meet my child where they are. So what if they are 2 to 4 years behind their peers? Maybe they're way more behind their peers than that. And it's okay. It's a matter of meeting them where they are. So maybe at age 18, they're not ready to go to higher education. That's okay. So part of what we're talking about today is that there are awesome higher education options for people with disabilities, including people that have an intellectual disability or severe learning differences. There are options out there. So just think about that. And so what I say is set realistic expectations. So maybe, as like what April was talking about, maybe some of our kids aren't ready for the responsibility that comes with higher education, whether it's the community college or the university, but maybe they would build skills by, being connected to VR. They've done that vocational evaluation and they're doing training, okay? Not for credit, but they're doing training to close their gaps on their impediments to employment and growing mature as they're doing that, where in a couple of years they might be ready for higher education. So as I mentioned, there's transition programs, trade school, community college, university programs, there's certificate programs and licenses. And I'm a fan of the certificate programs and licenses because they don't require 4 years of college for that. It may be a training program. It may be a few months. It might be 9 months or a year, and then they come out with a license. And some of these folks are coming out with these licenses and they're making more than what they would have with a 4-year degree. So don't rain on something that might be less than a 4-year degree. Think about a reduced college course load. This is again, I'm coming back to let's meet our kids where they are. So in our mind, a full college course load is 12 hours. Well, most of our kids can't handle that. That's too much. So maybe we start with one class that I'm a huge fan of, and I'm probably not calling it the right thing. Somebody can put it in the chat box if they know. But like the university, the introduction to university studies or introduction to college studies. It is a whole course, 4 credit course that teaches them how to be a successful college student. It's a great course. It's a great dip your toe in type of course that you could take. For those kids that might be ready early, you could actually even do a dual credit course that they might get credit for while they're still in high school, but that's a great place to start. We want to build some successes and build on the successes that they have, not set them up destined to fail at a 12-hour course load that maybe they can't handle, and then they do poorly and then they want to give up. So we want to build that. We want to have success with one, and if success with one went great and it was easy peasy, then maybe we add 2 courses the next semester and then kind of build up from there. The Social Security Administration considers a person a full-time student. If they are disabled, they are considered a full-time student at 8 hours, not 12 hours. So I wanted you guys to know that as well. We can think of living on campus or versus living at home or some combination. And there are partnerships with other organizations that you can do to help living on campus go smoother. There's TRIO programs that are designed to help people that are first time or first generation college students, and they have tutors and other things available. All of these schools have tutoring programs, and it's my recommendation that we plan early, that we know where the tutoring is. Don't wait for failing to be happening or we're halfway into the semester and it's not looking good. Get the tutors on board in the beginning. We've talked about the Workforce Commission and Workforce Solutions and VR. Think about the career path and the ideal work settings. And that's another thing that I've seen with the VR programs and Workforce Solutions, where they have a disability employment tool and it kind of explores different careers and what they pay and what is it that you have to do to be able to do that. So that's a good thing to look at as well. And also, the Department of Labor has registered apprenticeships where they're paid for, but they're getting trained and earning money while they're learning and growing, and they may end up with a license or things like that. And another program that we like people to know about is Project Search. That's a good program as well as far as employment for kids with disabilities. We've had clients ourselves that have had kids be placed at a hospital, be placed at Dow Chemical, and that those jobs, they kind of started out as small in an internship and they grew to something big in a full-time position. So looking at those options are all things that are going to be important. And that, again, is not Texas specific, it's all across the US. So 6 traits that students need to succeed: self-awareness. So they need to have some self-awareness and their strengths and weaknesses, both academic and non-academic. What are my shortcomings? What do I do poorly with? What do I thrive in? So some of that self-awareness is going to be important. They need to be proactive. They need to have perseverance, and they need to be able to work on goal setting. And they need to have effective social support systems and know how to use those. And then, of course, the emotional coping strategies. That's a big one. A lot of our kids with developmental disabilities are late to the party. They get there. But as far as a maturity standpoint, and if their maturity is behind, then their emotional coping strategies are also behind. And it does get better. I see where we were at 15 and where we were at 18 and 21, and I see growth, right? Like, so when you're sitting there at 15, you might even think, I mean, there were times that I thought, oh, this is never happening, because I couldn't foresee into the future where we were going or where we're getting. And again, I like to remind folks that the average brain is not fully formed until age 26. I know that sounded depressing when I read that the first time and I had a 15-year-old, right? Seemed really far away. But when we have a child with a disability, that timeline is a little bit longer if they're 2 to 4 years behind their peers. So they might not be ready at 18 to go to college, but maybe they are at 27, maybe it's 24. And that is part of it. It's okay. Let's meet them where they are. So one of the things that I think is critically important, and it's probably been important to your students' success thus far, is accommodations. So as April mentioned earlier, in the schools, we're familiar with that term IEP, the education plan 504. And this is where they have accommodations that are appropriate for their disability to help them succeed at education. So the first thing that I would like to tell you is that your accommodations at the public school or the private school don't just automatically transfer to the college or the university. There is not a magic transfer button. Every school is a little bit different. Okay, so what I did as a parent is I knew what our accommodation needs were and what we needed, and what I had my list of non-negotiables. And so first I researched the schools that had the degree path that we were looking for. Then I researched the offices of disabilities. And quite honestly, if the Office of Disability was bad, they were off the list, period. We need accommodations. We need what we need. There's non-negotiation with this. And so if the Office of Disability was bad, then they were just off the list. So I would encourage you to do your homework. All schools have an Office of Disability, and they're all created differently. Some are huge and they have large staff and large resources, and some offices of disability might be a one-man show. So think about SAT, ACT, AP exams, college courses, and graduate level exams. Check requirements early for accommodations. The SAT and ACT, they all provide accommodations for testing, but you have to go to their website. You have to download that form. That form needs to be signed off on by a doctor, and you have to submit it, and you have to submit it in a timely manner to have it approved prior to the testing. Some things, the types of accommodations for an SAT and the ACT might be extra time. It could be up to 100% more time, 50% more time for those that have learning disabilities, processing speed delays, working memory issues. That might be one. They might have a reader where somebody reads the questions to them. They may have a testing in a non-distracted area where they will sit in a small, quiet office as opposed to a giant classroom with 100 students. Those are some examples of the accommodations that you can get. And you have a guidance counselor. All these high schools have a guidance counselor. They are aware of accommodations and how to apply for them. So you can work with your school and the guidance counselor. You can also go directly to the websites of the ACT and SAT and download the form yourself and get it signed off on by the doctor. The main thing is you got to know you got to get it signed by the doctor. Okay. So think about what accommodations are necessary. They will look at what accommodations that you have in the public school. It doesn't mean that they're going to grant all of them. So you can supply your IEP or your 504 to the higher education institution, and they will take that into consideration. My experience is that I didn't have any of the accommodations requested denied. Okay, so if you've got a good basis for why the accommodations are needed, then I didn't have an issue with getting them denied. So every school, this was one thing that I found frustrating when we were evaluating lots of schools, that every school and their requirements for updated testing is different. So this is where we're talking about updated testing like neuropsych testing, learning disability testing, IQ testing. So usually they're asking for testing that has been updated in the last 3 to 5 years. I was able to get some schools to take the old testing with a letter from the doctor saying, we haven't retested because it's not necessary because everything stays the same, and the accommodations needed then are still the accommodations needed now. Please, I've seen this patient for this many years, and some schools were able to take that. Some of that neuropsych testing can be pretty expensive, $3,500 to $5,000. That may be something if it's part of the IPE with VR, that they may cover that type of testing that may be included in some of the assessments that they do. Generally, this neuropsych testing is usually not covered by your health insurance. Sometimes you can get it covered, like if you had a kid that had cancer and has chemo brain, you can get it covered. But in general, just for learning disabilities, it's generally not covered. So the power of attorney and a FERPA. So the FERPA is the document that you need to have your student sign, that will allow you to call on their behalf and speak to the university about your student. The FERPA is required. The school is not being mean, it's the law. Okay. And people are annoyed, parents are annoyed. What do you mean I pay 50 grand a year for this school and you're not going to talk to me? Are you kidding me? And I feel the same way, but it is the law. So get the FERPA signed. All the schools have a FERPA paper on their website, so you can download that and get your student to sign that. We suggest that when you send your kids to college, even your neurotypical kids, that you have a power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney in place in case something happens. It's going to be important. So reasonable accommodation is required if it does not pose undue hardship. This is true in the job as well. So April, I want to just pause for a second and take some questions.
We did have a question earlier. Why isn't there an easy to access vendor or service provider list for consumers to review? I'm in the Austin area and have been told my son is qualified and even have an IPE in place. We've barely been able to access anything to date. It has been years of trying.
So this person is talking about services of VR services, and my opinion is that all VR counselors are not the same. And since COVID, there has been a lot of turnover of VR counselors through the years. So you may be reaching out to a counselor that is no longer there, but you can get a supervisor. You can reach out to April, and April can connect you with the supervisor or the right people. And maybe you need to get your case transferred to another counselor that is going to be proactive. So what I would say is don't give up on that. You are not alone. You are not alone. I've experienced some of that same stuff myself with my own child. But you can get a new counselor assigned, and your perseverance is going to pay off. And would you like to add to that, April?
That is why I really suggest, and I'm grateful that a parent's asking to always take an advocate. And I do say to record not your conversations, but every interaction with a VR counselor to make sure that they've not asked you for something that you've missed and to make sure that you're able to follow up with, well, I've emailed here. This is what I asked you. Could you please respond to that? And if you don't get a response, yes, you can reach out to me, but there's also a number that you can call for VR, and I'll find that and put it here in the chat in just a moment. You can reach out to that number and ask to be assigned to a different counselor, because sometimes counselors, like you said, are really busy, or sometimes personalities just don't mesh. Maybe you have a male counselor and you prefer a female counselor. All those things to be said, you can change counseling load.
Thank you for that. So, somebody said, what about a supported decision-making agreement? A lot of people have a power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, and supported decision-making agreement in place, and those are all fine. The other thing, if you're going to do a supported decision-making agreement, I wouldn't do it without a power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney. I think that those three documents go well together. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you, and this is very important, and I'm sorry I forgot that. If you have a child that is going to be under guardianship, some programs will not take the student. So you're going to need to research the programs very specifically. And I am not pro or against guardianship. In the state of Texas, it's the least restrictive, most appropriate for the individual, basically. And so some people truly need guardianship. And there are many, many programs that accept students that are under full guardianship. But that is going to be when you're researching the place that has the programs that your child is interested in, you're researching the Office of Disability, and you are confirming if you have a child that's going to be under guardianship, you are confirming if they accept or do not accept people under guardianship, because then that way you can take them off your list. But I would ask that question pretty early on. I think it's very, very important. And then also a HIPAA authorization to go along with your other legal documents. I agree with that as well, a HIPAA release to release information. So everybody's going to get a copy of today's slides. There are tons of links in these slides, and so we're not going to go over each and every one of these programs. But we've got lots of links for various programs all across Texas and the United States. Some are in different states, but these are programs that we know are known for working with individuals with a disability, including an intellectual disability. Some of them are on the program because they're specifically a program for people with intellectual disabilities, and some of them are on the list because we know that they have an awesome Office of Disabilities. So there's, there'll be links to every single one of these. And what I would tell you is research early, create a spreadsheet, who's on the list, when do the applications open up, how many slots do they have? Not all of them have endless slots for your students. So, the whole early bird gets the worm kind of thing. If you want choice, you want to know when the applications open and close. How long are the programs? Some of these programs might be a year, they might be 9 months, they might be 4 years. And some of them, again, are going to be certificate programs, or, we've seen programs where people are learning the restaurant industry or the hospitality industry. We've seen like greenhouse stuff, that kind of thing. We've seen all kinds of different programs. So check out these links, check out the programs. There are programs. And so for all of you that are out of state, I know a lot of parents, they want to keep their kids in the same state. That's an important factor. Some people, not so much, but researching higher education options for individuals with a disability or with learning disability is going to pull up, specific ones in your state. So these are just some links to all of the programs that we're aware of. This lifelong learning with friends, it's not a college education. It is actually through UT, but there's classes and they're pretty great classes that you can look into. That might be a place where you could dip your toe in to some of these classes before jumping in with both feet. Another place that you can find colleges and universities all across the United States, not just in Texas, is thinkcollege.net. It's the only directory, and it has over 309 colleges and universities that offer post-secondary education programs for students with intellectual disabilities. So this is a great website that you're going to want to check out and kind of see what your options are for you. And it's again all across the United States. Jody Glau, we've done presentations with her in the past, and I'm a fan of Jody. Jody is a person who runs custom college consulting, and she specializes in working with students who have learning challenges to find their best fit wherever that may be. So we have a lot of families that would like to engage somebody else that is a specialist in finding the right fit for your student. So she is a consultant that you could reach out to and hire. She only takes so many a year, so you'll want to find out, you'll want to reach out to her. She is not in Texas. I don't remember exactly where she is, but she works all across the United States. And what I love about her is she goes grassroots on campus. She goes and tours these places. She knows the ins and outs of what's what of these programs. And so if you're a parent and you really don't have time to handle all that kind of stuff, then you may want to consider a consultant. I would say be careful in the consultants, because a typical college consultant is not a special needs college consultant. And so you want to work with one that is specifically nuanced with working with people with disabilities. I think that's going to be important. College living experience. We've done webinars with them in the past as well. They provide individualized post-secondary guidance and instruction. They have locations all across the U.S., not just in Texas. They are in Texas, but all across the U.S. And this is kind of a program that goes alongside the college, community college or university, and they live there. So they live there and they're learning life skills and building independent living skills, as well as getting help with academics and career development and social development. So this may be something that might be unaffordable for some families, because you would be paying for the higher education as well as the CLE, but this has been a great fit for a lot of families, so it might be worth checking into. Some people, they actually start, my slides went a little bit crazy. They actually start at CLE and they might be in maybe they're not registered for school, and then they dip their toe in and they register for the community college nearby, and then they have some success with the community college, and then they transfer to the university. So there's kind of a graduation of that. April, do we have some additional questions?
We do. We had one that I did answer in the chat. Remind me, does TWC pay for programs outside the state of Texas? And I said, generally speaking, they're going to prioritize Texas programs. However, since it's individualized to the needs of the student or the person applying for vocational rehabilitation, it's not out of the cards completely. So I would definitely, if there's a specific reason to go outside of Texas, I would still ask. Never hurts to ask. And there are times where they have paid for other programs outside of Texas. And then oh, did you have something?
No, I said nice. That's good. That's worth asking. I agree.
Yes. I applied for TWC for my child and was asked to provide mortgage statement, and 2 check stubs. Why do they need to check our financial status? And I would say if your child is going to be part of vocational rehabilitation, they do that across the board. However, I will say vocational rehabilitation requirements for families to contribute a little bit are much higher. So families that think that they would never qualify for anything actually end up qualifying a lot of the time for vocational rehabilitation. So there's,
And sometimes they qualify and there's like a small portion that the family has to pay, but VR covers most of it, but there might be a small portion which beats the heck out of paying 100% of it as a family. So I remember and signing up for VR and they asked for a lot of information, all the proof of the diagnosis, all the financials and everything like that. And they have a formula and it's clear as mud, but there is a formula of how what the family's expected contribution would be versus it being completely covered. But we've certainly seen a lot of things covered. And this slide right here, we're going to keep moving. This is the pre-employment training services, and April touched on this a lot. But so there are pre-employment training services. There are programs, Summer Earn and Learn, which that deadline is coming up. If it isn't, it's probably the end of the month. When is the Summer Earn and Learn deadline?
yes, in our area, it's the end of the month. And so if you'd like your student to be involved in Summer Earn and Learn and they are not already enrolled in vocational rehabilitation, I'm telling people to please get a hold of a VR counselor and get enrolled quickly so that you can begin the process for the SEAL application for summer.
The SEAL application is a good deal. They find the jobs, they have employers that employ people with disabilities, and they get a guaranteed wage and usually, 10 to 20 hours a week, depending on the student's needs or whatever. And I think it's 10 or 12 weeks out of the summer. It's a really good way to dip the toe in. And so get your applications in. The deadline, as far as I know, the deadline is typically the end of February every year. So we are approaching that quickly. So what about funding? The bottom line is when it comes to paying for all of this, it's expensive when we're talking about higher education. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. I recommend that everybody completes this. Even if you say we make too much money, I still want you to complete it because a lot of the scholarships out there require a FAFSA, whether your expected family contribution is 100% versus zero. Still complete the FAFSA. This opens up in October of every year. So if your kid is a senior this year, then you could have already done the FAFSA in October. Okay. Scholarships, there's community-based, school-based, disability and disease-based, sports, music, band-based. Research early and know your deadlines as they're all different. I had to have a whole spreadsheet for this because I was determined to get my child's college funding, which I did 100%. But you got to be clever, and this is not a job for your student. It's a lot. It's a lot of information. It is a co-job of you and your student, and more you than your student is what I would say. Um, they can't be easy. All of the applications are different. All of the deadlines of when they open up and when they close is different. So a lot of times people think that, senior year at Christmas break, I'm going to do all the scholarship applications. It's true that some of them are still open, but some of those scholarship applications have already closed by Christmas break. So you want to research early, have your spreadsheet, and keep a list of what is out there. So there's the funding of, by using a 529 college savings plan. Some people use funding from an ABLE account. And then some people have funding for the higher education through vocational rehab, which we have talked about if it's in line with the IPE. Okay. So ABLE accounts and how they work. We have entire presentations about ABLE accounts, but ABLE accounts are under the 529A Act and the tax code. The beneficiary is the account owner. The income earned in the account is not taxable. And the cool thing about an ABLE account is money in the ABLE account does not count against them for SSI and Medicaid purposes. Okay. So that's one reason. So we generally follow the rule of thumb of not to have more than $2,000 in an individual with a disability's name outside of an ABLE account or a special needs trust. So for an ABLE account for 2025, you can put $19,000 a year into an ABLE account. If the individual is working, you can put an additional 15,560 up to their earnings amount. So if they worked and they only earned 5,000, you can only put an additional 5,000 above the 19,000. We never want these accounts to go over 100,000. As long as the person's disability started prior to age 26, they can have an ABLE account. You can only have one ABLE account. We can't have multiple ABLE accounts for the same individual with a disability. A grandparent can't have one, too. So it's disability started prior to age 26, and then in 2026, that age is going up to age 46. One thing to note, and again, check out the webinar on ABLE accounts, is there is a Medicaid payback in the state of Texas. All states are different, and whether or not there's a Medicaid payback on an ABLE account. And so some people say, well, I heard that I could have an ABLE account in any state, and that is absolutely true. You can have an ABLE account in any state, but some people think that they're going to go to another state that doesn't have a Medicaid payback, and so they can avoid a Medicaid payback, and that is not true. If you live in the state that has a Medicaid payback, even if you get an ABLE account for a state that doesn't have one, you would still have that Medicaid payback. So an ABLE account can pay for things that a special needs trust cannot pay for without a 1/3 reduction to SSI. And think about it can pay for housing, it can pay for monthly debt service, rent, mortgage, utilities, legal services, financial services, transportation services, education, assistive technology, personal support services, even recreation or vacations. The list is long, and if it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, you can pay for it out of an ABLE account. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to run through these relatively quickly, and I'm not going to go through all of the links. In these slides here, we've got lots and lots pages of scholarships that are out there that we know about. This is not an exhaustive list. It's not meant to be an exhaustive list, but it is meant to get your wheels turning, to understand that there is a lot of money out there for kids, including kids with disabilities, as far as scholarships are concerned. The one thing that I like to mention to people, if you have somebody who is adopted through the state adoption system, so this is Texas or whatever state you're in, most states that you've adopted a child through the state adoption services or kind of social services program, that those kids go to college, for in-state college, for free. So it may have been a long time ago that somebody told you that, if the kid was an infant when you got the child, and now they're going to be 18. But just don't forget that if you have adopted through the state adoption system. One thing that I suggest asking for is a list of scholarships from the child life specialist at the specialty clinic that you go to. And I'm just giving an example of Texas Children's, Baylor College of Medicine, etc. Whatever facility you go to, and maybe you see cardiac, maybe you see oncology, maybe you see juvenile diabetes group. They all have a child life specialist, and they have a list of scholarships that might be available for your child. So it's worth it to ask them for this list. I like to mention the Terry Foundation Scholarship. Now, for those that are attending out of state, this is specifically for Texans, okay? The Terry Foundation Scholarship has been around since 1987. It's not going anywhere. The scholarship fund runs in perpetuity, and this is for people who have a powerful story. They've had decent grades. They don't have to be straight A's, but they've given back. They've given back in the community. They've have a lot of service. And so these scholarships you could apply for. So in the right-hand side here, you see all of the universities that have the Terry Foundation Scholarship at this point. So you don't just apply through the Terry Foundation on their website. You could apply for this scholarship this many times through the website of each one of these universities, and wherever you get it is where you end up going. But this is basically a full ride scholarship. It's a pretty good gig, and it pretty much pays for everything. So this is one that one of my kids got, and it was an absolute blessing. And I thought about things as we were In high school, well, we're not going to get a sports or band or music or any of these other scholarships, and we're not going to get an academic scholarship. I mean, we do okay, but we don't, we're not the top 10 or the top 5%. But what could we do? And so we got her volunteering with several meaningful organizations. I don't mean volunteering at your church, and I'm not saying that the church isn't meaningful, but everybody lies on their applications and say that they volunteer at church, right? So the college admissions officers are used to that. Okay, so meaningful volunteer, those volunteer hours. That so check out the Terry Foundation because it could change your kid's life, and it could be the difference of $150,000 out of your pocket versus not, as far as a 4-year degree. So these are just pages of scholarships. If you can think of it, there's probably a scholarship for it. There's scholarships for kids, for siblings of kids that have a disability. So there are scholarships for every type of disease and diagnosis that you can think of. So you're going to want to research those specifically. There's lots of links here. And again, it's not an exhaustive list, but there is lots of links here. So just pages of scholarships out there so you can put on there. I know for Texas, the rodeo has a big scholarship. So those are scholarships that you can look at, and the 4-H club has some big scholarships out there as well. Most 4-H clubs across the United States, some of the state fairs, we do rodeo here, I guess we do the state fair, but some of the state fairs have big scholarships as well. So you're going to want to check those out as well. So books to consider, the Guide to Colleges for Students with Learning Differences, Fisk Guide to College, and Colleges That Change Lives are all books that you can order on Amazon that we think might be helpful in your journey. And so, we've come to a point where we can take a few other questions. Do we have some more questions?
We do have a couple. Does VR provide support for job if needed? And can that person go with them to the job? So vocational rehabilitation does provide worksite trainers for students and for adults as needed, and then they fade out. The support is meant to fade. A person is not an additional worker on the job. Sometimes people confuse that. Employers, especially with somebody who came to help out extra, but that person is specifically made to help the student or the adult acclimate to what's required of them on the job and help train them a little bit extra than what the employer may have time for. And then another question was, does a student have to already be enrolled in pre-ETS to apply for SEAL? And I said no, but it is best to be enrolled in vocational rehabilitation. If the student requires a work trainer at all, or some people call that a job coach on site, if they are not full-time enrolled in vocational rehabilitation, that on-site work trainer cannot be provided. And unfortunately, for some students that are having trouble on a job site, that might mean the end of their SEAL participation for that summer if they hit some hiccups. So I really recommend you are enrolled in vocational rehabilitation. That way, if you need those added supports, they're there. It doesn't terminate the SEAL placement for the summer.
Awesome. So we're kind of wrapping up for today. We always have things to keep on your planning radar. Kind of thinking about SSI, SSDI, Medicaid waivers, how to get them. Some states have zero waiting lists for Medicaid waivers. Texas, unfortunately, has a very long waiting list for Medicaid waivers. But there are Medicaid waivers in every state in the United States. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, reach out or check out our Medicaid waivers webinar on that. Planning for the future, developing a special needs care plan, having a future care cost estimate of how much money do I need to fund a special needs trust. These are all things that should be on your radar. Are we going to do guardianship or alternatives to guardianship? What do I need to know about that? When should I start that process? Those are all things. We've got webinars on every single one of these topics on our YouTube channel, so you'll want to check that out. Everybody's going to get a copy of today's slides, and in the slides you're going to have a link to our upcoming webinars that you can register for, and it'll kind of spell out the topic and what we're going to be talking about. We work on a collaborative team here at CPG. Again, we're nationally certified as Social Security advisors. members of the Special Needs Planning Academy, and chartered special needs consultants. We stand ready to help you plan for the future of your loved one. We always offer free personalized consultations. So this QR code, you can hover your camera over, and that'll take you to a calendar where you can schedule your free personalized consultation. Most of the people that come to us, they've done some planning. Maybe they've done some planning and it's kind of sat on the shelf and we haven't looked at it in a while. Some people have done a lot of planning and they need a second opinion or a look under the hood of what do they already have in place. And they want to make sure that they have things set up properly. And some people will say, I'd be embarrassed for you to know what I haven't done so far. And it doesn't matter where you are in the journey. It's about getting started or picking up where you left off. So we can definitely help you. And the free personalized consultation is designed for us to learn a little bit more about you, the planning that you've done so far. You'll learn a little bit more about us and the doors that you can walk through at Consolidated Planning Group. And together we can determine if it makes sense for us to talk going forward. So there's no pressure or anything like that. It's really designed to give you the knowledge and tools that you need to be successful. So April, it's certainly been my pleasure being here with you today. And thanks everyone for your awesome questions. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. And in the meantime, we will look forward to partnering with you again soon, April.
All right, take care.
Thanks everyone. Take care. Bye now.
Bye.